It's my pleasure to, hi everyone. This is the second panel of our Berkeley Food Institute career panel series. This session, we are focusing on food justice nonprofits from a regional lens. And it's also my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Tiffany Deguzman, who is the Director of Client Services for the Food Justice Project. And briefly, the Food Justice Project helps undergraduate UC Berkeley students gain access to CalFresh benefits, a really important sort of access point for people, for us interested in food justice, right? Because it begins with how we get access to healthy foods. Deguzman is also a second-year Berkeley law student and will graduate in 2022. So yeah, can you take it away, Tiffany?
Thank you, Jesus, and thank you to everyone for being here. We have a really exciting panel of people who are here to share about their careers and a little bit more about themselves and what food justice is in the larger context. So with that, I will get us started. Each panelist will introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their career path and how they ended up where they are today and what they do in their day-to-day. So with that, Clarissa, could you please get us started?
Hello, everyone. Of course, I would love to. Hello, my name is Clarissa Broughton, and I'm the Channel Development Strategist at the Alameda County Community Food Bank. It's located in Oakland, but we serve all of Alameda County. And then an important thing to note in that is that we're not actually like run or affiliated with the main Alameda County. It just happens to be in our name. So a lot of people get that confused, but I actually had an unconventional path to my job at the food bank. I actually started out as a summer volunteer, and during that time I developed some standard operating procedures and policies for the program I was volunteering with. And just in response to that, the food bank offered me an internship for that following summer, and then I ended up staying in the Bay Area and just working my way up through the food bank to where I am now. And I actually was a student at the same time. So that was just a great thing about working for my organization is they really value that work-life balance, and they really support you pursuing whatever you're interested in. But it was really through this process, I've been with the food bank for 6 years, that I really started to understand what food justice was and the systemic root causes like poverty and racism that put communities into a spot where there's widespread food insecurity, or the individuals in that community are marginally food insecure. And that basically means they're, right on that ledge of falling into food insecurity. They're doing a lot of work. They're doing a lot of living paycheck to paycheck. And I think COVID really highlighted that, and that we saw a lot of people who previously never even knew about our services now participating in our services. And that's really the food bank's role in food justice in the food system, is identifying communities and individuals who are food insecure or marginally food insecure, and then creating partnerships in those communities to provide services that don't only include directly receiving food, but helping people apply for CalFresh benefits. A great thing about the food bank is instead of going down to, the main city or county location to apply, you can come, well, you used to pre-COVID be able to come into our office, and now during COVID, a lot of that has gone to, over the phone eligibility screenings or Zoom eligibility screenings, but that's one of the other services. And then really the food bank's other main activity within food justice is being an advocacy arm. So it's a huge trend now that a lot of food banks are starting to add an advocacy department, and they are the ones really out there working to help get socially just policies passed. So that's everything from, criminal reform bills to safety net programs like SNAP and CalFresh to, advocating for COVID relief. And that is just equally as important as putting food into people's hands, is making sure that they don't find themselves in these positions again. And really my particular role is looking at innovative new partnerships that we can initiate or build in the community that will allow us to respond to the various changes in our environment. And again, COVID is a great example of that. We had a lot of just walk-up services or indoor pantry services that our partners in the community had, or that we ran directly, and then COVID happened and we had to make a huge shift to drive-through services. So that's really my role, is to look at how we can make those shifts and create those partnerships in the community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Thank you for your introduction, and also for all of the important work that you're doing at the food bank. And with that, I would love to pass it off to our next panelist, Ildi, who is the Executive Director at the California Institute for Rural Studies.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks to BFI for organizing this panel. I'm honored to be a part of it. My name's Ildi Carlisle-Cummins, and I am currently the director at the California Institute for Rural Studies. And as I was thinking about this panel tonight, I was thinking about how my passion really is for storytelling. And that might not be immediately obvious in my job description. I don't know if that word appears anywhere in the job title or the job description, but that really is how I landed in this position. And I thought I could just take a couple minutes and trace my story back and share why I think that storytelling is at the root of any kind of change work that we're doing, and is maybe even especially compelling when you think about food and food systems change. So for me, I feel like the path towards this work really started back when I was a kid in the kitchen with my dad. The kitchen was always the best place for conversation, and clearly everything we were doing was revolving around food and food production and food preparation and sharing food. So I really have sort of been led by my stomach my entire life, and certainly through my career. When I got old enough to grow up and leave California, go to Michigan for college, I continued to eat my way through those 4 years, but I ended up in doing a field course in sustainable agriculture and natural resource management because I was interested in the way that people related to food and food systems. And I ended up there in this field course in a chicken barn, listening to the benefits of manure-based compost systems in September of 2001. And our teacher at the time got a call on this big old satellite phone that she carried around, probably because we're a bunch of American kids on a field course and our parents wanted to know they could call us. But she got a phone call on September 11th, 2001, and was told what had happened with the terrorist attacks in the US. And so there we were, really remote, a group of 13, 20-year-olds learning about this news and trying to grapple with what had happened back, in our home country, and then spent the, remaining weeks and months together talking this through, trying to think about what this meant for the future of our country and a path towards war, and what could have caused something like that. And really talking a lot about justice issues and basic needs and human rights and response. And what we were seeing in front of us, kind of the backdrop, again, like the kitchen with my dad, the backdrop for these conversations were all of these organic farms and parks and farms that were working together to think about what a sustainable agriculture system might look like. So at that moment, in that sort of crack moment in my life, I think my sort of career in food systems change work was cemented. And I came back to the US and then eventually made my way back to California and did spend about 10 years in various parts of the California food movement. So working with Community Alliance for Family Farmers, working with food banks, working with school garden programs, and trying to, bring local produce into school district menus, kind of doing a lot of things that might be familiar to folks that are interested in food systems work in California. And I after doing that work for about 10 years, I took another field course, this time in the Pajaro Valley in Watsonville in California. And we were learning about the history of apple orchards and some of the Ukrainian families that had settled in the area. And I just had this another moment of realizing that if I was going to understand how the California agriculture system was built, I needed to understand where we had been and who had helped to shape the system and what kind of structures and barriers we were really trying to push against. So in another change moment, kind of got redirected to thinking about key moments in the history of California farming that have shaped the system, and went back to school and got a community development degree at UC Davis and asked anyone I could in any department across campus what they thought were the driving forces that had shaped California farming, and emerged from school with a collection of stories that I thought that the food movement should really know about. And I ended up pitching a project called the CalAg Roots project that was produced a podcast, continues to produce podcasts that tell these stories about these really important moments when everything could have looked different in California farming. And we do, pre-COVID days, we did a series of live events and tried to spark as much dialogue as we could within sort of food movement circles about what shapes California farming and the history of it, and really putting some historical roots behind change work that I felt like were really lacking and that were leading the food movement to kind of chase its tail in some kind of disturbing ways and replicate patterns of injustice throughout the food system. So that's how I landed at the California Institute for Rural Studies. Now, and that's the organization I direct now. CRS has this 40-year history of doing research for action in rural California. And the mission was broad enough to encompass a project like mine that wanted to do storytelling, historical research and storytelling for change. And so that's how I landed there. And then flash forward 5 years, my boss, who had the vision to bring CalAg Roots into CIRS fold, was retiring. And last fall, I stepped into the position of director and had to broaden my storytelling work yet again to think about how we partner deeply with communities to understand what kinds of research, what kinds of information they need to be able to tell their own stories, to bring rural voices into the conversation about development in California, and to be able to have tools created from that information that make change in their communities. By March, I'll stop. I'm probably almost out of time. I'll stop right here. But by March, as the shelter-in-place order came down in California, obviously everything changed with our work. The research we thought we were going to do, we didn't do, and we pivoted everything to focusing on a COVID-19 farm worker study, working with 6 different farm worker serving orgs across the state. They were really the beating heart of this project. And we ended up surveying workers and interviewing workers and collecting some of the only data in the nation about how the pandemic has affected farm workers. I'll post the link to that study in the chat. People can check it out, and I'm eager to participate in the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ildi, and thank you for your feelings, sharing your feelings about storytelling. I too think about storytelling a lot, so that's really awesome. And with that, I'll hand it off to Daniella, who is our next panelist. She is the Community Engagement Manager at the Kitchen Table Advisors.
Thanks so much, Tiffany, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm really excited to be here. Just a quick note, actually, as of a couple weeks ago, I'm a director at KTA leading communications, which is an exciting new role for me. But actually I want to start with my journey in food justice, and that begins with architecture. I'm a Cal alum, and I studied architecture at Cal, and through 4 years took advantage of the liberal arts education and took classes in so many other departments. When I was getting ready to graduate, I realized actually architecture was not what I wanted to do. I think I really loved what architecture taught me around systems and how the entire system of a building can affect, an occupant's experience, and how an entire system of a, city, economy, society has the same effects. So I was frantically scouring Craigslist for what else am I going to do? I moved up to the Bay to go to school, really wanted to move to San Francisco, needed a job to do that. So it wasn't really until I was looking at postings on Craigslist that I really started to think about food as a career. Food had always had a personal significance for me. I grew up in an immigrant family. My parents are from, 2 different hemispheres. They did not grow up speaking the same language, and food was always really a connector. I think both as the child of immigrants and as someone who's multicultural growing up, I was also like Ildi in the kitchen with my dad, with my grandmother, and that was sort of a lifeline to culture, and also a way that all sides of my family could come together. So when I started thinking about what else I wanted to do, food sort of instantly sparked this interest, and I saw this posting on Craigslist for an internship with this organization called La Cocina, which I'd never heard of, in San Francisco. And it was, talked about all the things that I was interested in: working with women, working with immigrants, food. So I applied and got it, and worked my way up from intern, and then 5 years later was managing the program, and it was everything that I wanted to do. And I loved the people that I worked with. I loved the job, but it was my first job out of college, and didn't really know how to practice self-care, didn't really know how to sort of advocate for myself and growth opportunities within an organization. So it was really feeling burnt out and stuck, which I think is something important to know within food justice, is just how to pace yourself. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. How do you continue to do this work for the long term? That's something that I've really had to learn throughout my career. And, so I was 5 years in, feeling stuck, and a friend of mine recruited me to work for another organization with San Francisco Unified School District around redesigning the student meal experience and focusing on school food. And I did that for about a year. Was not the right fit. I felt really isolated from the food community that I had built up, and just the bureaucracy was a challenge for me. So left that, was feeling pretty lost, just trying to figure out what to do. And through my former colleague from La Cocina, I was introduced to Kitchen Table Advisors, and I had known about the organization. It's sort of roughly inspired by the La Cocina model, but I was new to agriculture, and I think what really stood out to me was something that I loved about working at La Cocina, which was supporting immigrant entrepreneurs in following their dreams of owning their own businesses and feeding us. And I think what's really driven me is wanting the people who feed us and who nourish us to have visibility and self-determination, and to be able to thrive in our food system, because our food system is not designed for them to do so. So I've been at KTA for 4 years now, and I'm gonna wrap up because I know I'm out of time. But yeah, it's just been a great journey. So thanks again for having me, and excited to see your questions.
Thank you for your introduction, Daniella, and also for speaking to how easy it is to get burnout early in your career. I think that's something that a lot of people, especially people interested in social justice and food justice, will run into. So that was really insightful. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our last panelist to introduce himself. It's Herman Yee, who is the program manager at Urban Sprouts currently.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and to be on this panel. My name is Herman Yee. I am currently a program manager at Urban Sprouts, and we work in the southeast part of San Francisco with a social equity lens, and we base our work in the garden, and we do community cooking and nutrition as well as job readiness. As our focus. So we're in the Southeast, particularly Excelsior district in San Francisco, Mission Bay, Visitation Valley, particularly Sunnydale, which is the housing project I work in, spend most of my time. And yeah, so I've kind of had a winding journey as far as I don't know exactly how I got here, but I don't think I could get here without community, friends, and family. And so I think I'm a Cal grad. I graduated in 2002 and studied conservation and resources. Was born and raised in San Francisco, born to an immigrant family. Yeah, just honoring the fact that many immigrants, when they families, when they arrive in this country, they do work in the food system. And I don't know that that's where my family envisioned me as a young teenager. I think they're very traditional in wanting a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer. That didn't happen. I really enjoyed urban garden ecosystems, ESPM 117. And I think that kind of ignited my interest in just growing things at first. You know, I enjoyed growing things in the greenhouse, working in the Oxford tract and spending time with the retired professors there, Dr. Robbie and Dr. Vomis. Yeah, so I think I was very fortunate to have good mentorship from my Urban Garden Ecosystems GSI. And I graduated in 2001 or 2002. I forget now. I'd taken a year off because I was nearing burnout. So I went to the UC Santa Cruz farm, got a little bit of horticultural training there, and came back and graduated. And my GSI Patrick said, "Hey, do you want to work with me as an AmeriCorps in Alameda? Because I'm starting a nonprofit that will start a farm and a plant nursery." So yeah, I was really lucky to have that, because I think social networks and social capital is like one thing I've struggled with in my career. I've had my ups and downs, and I've wanted to even leave this work just because it's hard finding my place. So that mentorship just meant a lot. So I would say if you feel the need to have good mentorship, seek that out and express it to the people that you want to mentor you. And if they're available, hopefully they'll mentor. It's can't ever have too much mentorship, I think. So yeah, so I started working in Alameda for about a year and a half, and I started gardens in a community there with wine barrels. We cut wine barrels in half, filled them up with soil, went around the community, which is run by a nonprofit, and it was, I think it was all formerly homeless people, and it was a joy to work there because it was a very small community. It's really safe, and you're able to have those interactions in a small community. I'm doing this similar stuff in my work in Urban Sprouts now, 20 years later, and I'm trying to integrate more of the experiences that I've had, and just trying to do a good job and improve with it. So I would say, you know, when you're in a community, I came into Sunnydale and I found it much more challenging than Alameda, because it's a different community. Every community is different and has different different things that you have to learn about. And community and social trust is the basis of your work if you're working in the community. If you don't have that, it's harder to get your work done. So it took me a few years to be able to do that. And I think as Cal students, you have incredible expertise. And I think I'm inspired by an artist, Brett Cook, who I met and is a East Bay resident. And he talks a lot about social practice and directing inquiry, and not being part of the inquiry and not so much directing the inquiry, and just knowing you're a part of this, this work. And the amount of work that food justice involves is large. So don't do all of it. Don't do it yourself. So balance being an expert and being part of the inquiry, I would say, if you're working in the community. Because yeah, when I first came to Sunnydale, you know, when I go to Sunnydale, it really doesn't matter what degree I have. It matters the relationships in the community and being in dialogue and being of service. So yeah, let participants see what's valuable, and you know, and share power, because external evaluation is important. You will have funders that you want to do a great job for, but community is, you know, that's who will support you if you support them.
Thank you so much, Herman. It's really nice to think about how each of your roles, my role, all of our roles are interconnected with one another in this broader movement. So thank you for getting us started on that part of the conversation. And I just wanted to let all of our wonderful attendees know to please put your questions in the Q&A. It's at the far right of your bottom little panel. And yes, because we would love to have our panelists answer your questions. I have a lot of questions of my own, and so I think I'm going to kick us off with just one question. So this panel is part of a career series. So that means I'm sure a lot of our attendees, myself included, are interested in doing exactly what all of you have done and pursuing careers in food justice. So my question is there anything students who are interested in pursuing careers in food justice can do now to prepare themselves for this type of work? Is there anything you wish you would have known when you were in college, knowing what you know now? And that can be to any of our panelists.
Yeah, this is Clarissa. I'll say one thing is when I was in college, I wish I would have known that, you know, I just didn't have to wait. I didn't have to have some kind of official internship. So my advice would be to just find an organization that is working in the area you're working and doing what you want to do, and just reach out to them and see how you can help them. And I think specifically for college students, a lot of nonprofits can really value from skilled-based volunteers. So if even if you have like moderate proficiency in, say, Excel, or if you have proficiency in any kind of technology or experience organizing things, a lot of the partners, for example, the food bank works with, are seniors. It's a lot of seniors running food pantries connected with churches, and they are not great with technology or the internet. So for them to do their monthly reporting or sometimes doing food ordering, it can be a real challenge. And having someone who is able to fulfill that is a volunteer, because of course nonprofits, you know, we don't have huge budgets. It's a great way in the door, and just building that social network within that organization. So when opportunity becomes available, they'll definitely be thinking of you, and they'll have some idea of the work that you're capable of doing.
I think a piece of advice that I would offer, which given that we're in a pandemic, I think, you know, take with a grain of salt at the moment, but I think that experience, like on the ground in the food system, is incredibly valuable, not just on the like service provider or nonprofit side, but really like working in restaurants, like working in a farm. I think that we really value that type of experience at KTA, not just like the professional administrative office skills that you learn at another organization or even through school, but really like how can you relate to and understand the experience of the folks that are feeding us like every day and doing that hustle.
Ildi or Herman, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think there's really I think when I was doing work in Alameda versus later more current work, it's being able to listen. I think I've gotten better. I don't think I've always been good at it, but just being able to listen and just see what the metrics of success are in your work, you know, because some of it, I was talking about external, you know, you have funders, and you need to be accountable to that as well, but also let the community also dictate what success looks like, because you might want to have a awesome grocery store in your neighborhood that doesn't have a grocery store, but maybe that's not going to happen while you're there, but you can still do work that will possibly lead to it. So maybe there's a farmer's market the community might want, so you might be able to work smaller, and there's value in smaller wins and incremental change, because this work does take a long time, and as Daniella said, yeah, you want to take care of yourself while you're doing this work.
Can I just add one little comment to all of this, which I would just say, don't be afraid to go home and do work in the place where you're from, whether that's, you know, a neighborhood in San Francisco or East Porterville in the Valley. There's justice work to do across all of our communities, and I think there's real value in you bringing the depth of lived experience, expertise to justice work back in the place where you started.
Thank you all for your wonderful answers to my question. I've already learned so much from all of you. I'm going to kick it over to Kevin and Jesus to facilitate some audience questions.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I have a question. This is from someone anonymous, but they said, I love Ildi's philosophy on storytelling. I'm wondering what the other panelists think about the value of marketing and communications in supporting their causes. Do these organizations dedicate resources to storytelling?
Yeah, I don't mind starting us off again. Absolutely. The food bank strongly values telling the stories of our clients and community as sincerely and honestly as possible. We have a completely, includes one person that's specific for taking photos and doing all of our visual media, our social media. And then, we have a writer on there. We have a whole grants department and a person who's just out there collecting anecdotal stories and talking to families to report back to our funders. And we have someone that manages like our media relationships when we do like local news. And, we're always doing different outreach campaigns and mailers and things like that. So communication is in storytelling and just showing the community that we actually serve versus, this idea of who we should be serving or what the communities should look like is definitely a priority for food banks.
I can share. I definitely think that marketing and communications are incredibly important in this work. That's my whole job at KTA. But I don't think that our organization as a whole has necessarily dedicated a lot of resources to this area. In the 4 years that I've been with the organization, we've staffed up from 6 to 16. And in that entire time, I've been the only person doing communications in the organization. It's not until, as we're like budget planning for next year that we're hiring more communication support. And I've like really advocated for that this year. I'm just like, storytelling is so important and so critical to the work that we do. If we want to change the ecosystem and change the movement, it not only needs to happen at an institutional level, but also from a narrative level. And so finally, the organization is like starting to sort of as a whole see the value. But it's definitely, I think organizations tend to take communications and storytelling for granted sometimes, at least in my experience.
Herman, would you like to add anything?
Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah, storytelling is definitely crucial. And yeah, we are a small nonprofit, so we have pretty limited amount of staff hours for external kind of like social media based storytelling, but it is very important for building cohesion in the communities we work in, even if it's storytelling that doesn't make it to publishing, having stories that our communities use to interact with each other of how did this, it's important for me as a person that's not from the community that I work in to know the stories of how is that garden that I'm working in there. I relatively just arrived, and so how do I fit in, and how does my story, how do I listen to other people's story more than, it really being about my story. So connecting people and playing a role and being of service and connecting people and having their stories interact in small ways. We had a story about a plant that was growing out of auntie's garden. It was apazote. It's an herb that's used to cook beans with. And she's Chinese, so she doesn't know how to cook it. And I go to the mothers group, which is there's all women that all know how to cook with epazote, and they saw it and they're saying, "Hey, do you know whose plant that is?" And I said, "Absolutely, I know." And she doesn't speak Spanish, but I'll try my best to go in between and ask if you can harvest. And they harvested it, and they gave back a pot of beans to the woman. Just she learned how to cook with it. So, facilitating these sharings is very important. It's really the crux of our work in the community, and making sure that we share this place in common.
All right, thank you all. Let's move on to our next question.
Sure. This question, and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, from Suman Sundaresh. And this question is for Clarissa. Could you dive into some examples of advocacy work that the food bank does? And for example, you mentioned criminal reform. And additionally, how is food insecurity woven into that?
Sure, of course. So some of the advocacy work we do, a lot of it in the past. So we're one of the first food banks to have like a policy arm, and it's become more of a trend now. But a lot of it has been advocating around like SNAP, CalFresh, student meals, and helping to secure a budget for those types of policies. We take trips to the Capitol and actually engage with talks with our local and state officials. We do that with community members as well. So like I mentioned, Hunger Action Day is one of those, but then we also just have try to regularly engage with members like Eric Swalwell. And then over the years, as our strategic plan has changed and more people have recognized the systemic issues that are linked to food justice and food security, we've then again started to advocate for policies that do involve the criminal justice system. One of that was like re-enfranchising people who have had a felony but now have served their time and been on parole. Those people used to not be able to vote. So we've done a lot of advocacy around changing that, and that's changed in California. We advocated for, I think it's Prop 15, that would have taxed property, like business and property owners, in order to get funding for schools. Unfortunately, we weren't successful on that this time around. And then there was one more relating criminal justice that's slipping my mind right now. But the way college students weave into that is we do a lot of advocating around lowering the restrictions around college students being eligible for CalFresh. We actually have partnered with UC Berkeley to do some like registration like events to get students signed up. We advocated for allowing people who get SSI to also then be eligible for more CalFresh benefits, and that did pass. And last summer was one of the biggest times we had people calling in and we were getting their applications through. And then I think there's just a lot of other issues that directly affect college students. And in addition to just engaging college students to get active on their campus and do voter registration on their campus, training them, connecting them with the partners. I want to say in the last 4 years, we've partnered with almost every university and college in the Bay Area to have a food pantry on their campus and to be getting their food supply from us. So I think it's both directions, right? Being engaged in the legislation, but then also being active on the ground with those people in our community, and ultimately empowering them to then engage with other people and be active. So if we try to train people that are at our partner sites so that they then can, flourish and start their own grassroots initiatives.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Yeah, the denial of CalFresh to college students is a huge issue, and it's so great to see there's lots of people fighting that fight. Do we have more questions from the audience?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question from Anonymous. They said, the food justice movement seems to be alive and well in California. I'm curious what strategies or suggestions you all have for bringing that energy into more rural areas like Montana, where I live. And I guess this could also apply to, say, areas where food justice isn't such a large part of the discourse, such as, say, the American South. And what ideas do y'all have for bringing some of that energy into these areas?
I can attempt to answer this. I think, preface this by saying I've only ever lived and worked in California, which I know is, a privilege in terms of the food justice landscape. But I will say that I think that there's incredible food justice work happening all over the US. I know of a lot of incredible projects in the American South. And I'm sure that, I'm sure that there are projects in communities. I think it's maybe just a matter of asking questions and sort of, I think approaching it with curiosity, just like not automatically writing off whether or not this project is overtly food justice related, but really thinking about the issues that they're trying to tackle, and can you maybe strengthen their justice lens as a volunteer or employee.
Yeah, I love what Daniella just said. And I was thinking of kind of that same approach of approaching it with curiosity. And because I was born and raised in Georgia, and then 17, I actually started out in college in Dallas, Texas, and I went to San Antonio for a while, and eventually landed here in the Bay Area. But I'm thinking of the messaging that, say like the food bank here uses around, like, food justice is not just about, having enough food on your table. Or just about there's nowhere to get food in your area. It's about having access to healthy food, to fresh food, and access not just in proximity, but in pricing. But when I think about it, that's not going to be like a good push in, like, I grew up in Roswell, Georgia, outside of 45 minutes outside of Atlanta. It's this whole, like the whole kind of like healthy eating green and clean, that's just not as prominent in my area. They're going to say like, we love flavor. I can't, just thinking of the holidays, I'm going to miss out on so much like butter. My grandmother cooked with Crisco. I'm surprised I don't have the heart of like a 45-year-old. I had bacon 360 days a week. And then they won't make that link because I have people in my family who have lived to the mid 90s, and you're just like, try to explain to your family that that's kind of like just good luck, like, because their diet would not. So like really thinking about it kind of like through that lens. And also like school meals are just more common in Georgia. I remember growing up that like, if I didn't get a packed lunch, I could get a meal at school. And then high school, like pizza and fries was $3 compared to what kids face now. And I'm sure I didn't pay a lot of lunch debt, but I never had anyone come after my mom. I'm sure it was forgiven when I left the school system. But what are the values in your community? What are the, like Daniella said, what are the specific struggles in food justice to them? It may not be about health and wellness. It may be about having enough, having something in proximity. I think about how spread out things are in the southern regions and maybe even in the Midwest. So like, what is the value and challenges for them? And then just speak the language of your community.
I'll add that there are small family farmers all over the US, and like, farmers may not be using food justice language, but feeding people at a regional level and like hyper local level, I think that's justice.
Yeah, I completely agree. I grew up in the rural South, and I just want to say that, yeah, there's people doing that work everywhere. They're just might be doing it with different language. And if you feel like people aren't doing that work, then you can always be the first. There's nothing to say that you can't be the first to start it. And yeah, so let's move on to another question. These are also great.
This is another question that seems like it might be a good jumping off point off this one. Is what are some best practices, or let's say like what would be the best way for someone to reach out to you regarding like potential mentorship in the food justice movement?
Maybe if Herman or Ildi want to get us started this time.
I I can pipe up. Can I just put my email in the attendees list? Because people are welcome to reach out to me. I try and be really accessible to folks. I think it's really important that we be continually passing the torch to the next generation of folks. I'm not going anywhere. I just took this job, but I think cultivating new leadership all the time is an important part of what we try and do. And so yeah, the email box gets full and deep, but I think if you you know, present yourself as someone with energy and enthusiasm and interest in this, that's a really precious resource. And I think for nonprofits that are trying to stretch things as far as possible, that goes a long way. So contact me. I'm happy to be in touch with anyone wanting to turn research into stories and action across California.
Yeah, I can borrow the phraseology of a book called The Good Immigrant, and they say there's 3 types of immigrants, and there's ones that come through the door and close the door, and there's ones that come through the door and leave it open, and there's ones that come through the door and put their foot in the door so it doesn't close. So I have a desire to be the one that puts their foot down and has the door open. So I'm available. My email is herman@urbansprouts.org. Definitely always can contact me there. And I would say, yeah, and just in general, yeah, just think about the ways you can be of service while also, you know, getting something out of being in community and working with an organization. I think organizations often do need support, and your expertise, you might know GIS, you might have a skill that someone really doesn't have in their organization, and that's what you have. And you know, you have, if you think through your skill sets, you're gonna have unique skill sets that organizations do need. So I would say that would be a way, you know, just get in contact. Definitely contact organizations and individuals.
And just to add on like a tactical tip, I think I'd suggest reaching out with specifics, like a 15 to 20 or 30-minute like exploratory call. I think that it's easier for folks to say yes when it's sort of like a easy, digestible thing to commit to than like a more open-ended, just like sort of ask or inquiry. And also, I'm also open and interested to mentoring, and my email is my name at kitchentableadvisors.org, Daniella with 2 L's.
Thank you all for your generosity. And yeah, to the person who asked that question and everyone else here, remember you have a lot to give, and to a mentorship relationship as well. And people want to say yes to you. So yeah, let's move on to another question.
Sure, thanks, Tiffany. This question is from Lisa Roach, and they said a couple panelists mentioned burnout in their intros, and I'm wondering if they could speak to how they dealt with that and how they'd advise younger folks beginning their careers on how to foster environments that prioritize self-care and community care in their work.
I can maybe jump in since I brought it up. I think that something I've really struggled with is feeling guilty for taking care of myself. I mentioned that I grew up in an immigrant household, and that was definitely part of the culture. It's just like taking any time away from work meant, there were consequences to that in terms of livelihood. But I also think that there are consequences to this like larger movement and this larger work around justice if we don't take care of ourselves in the moment. And you know, I don't know that we have time for specifics, but I think for me, it's really been about working on that guilt and shame for taking the time, not just like when I need to take it because it's, you know, like really hurting or circumstances are dire, I'm already burnt out, but along the way, like before it's critical.
I'll just echo that and say, yeah, thinking about being sure that you're aware of the burnout coming, or checking in, or listening to your friends when they ask where you've been, or like, you know, why aren't you, what's wrong? You know, sort of like taking care of yourself before you reach the end of the rope is really important. And I would also just say that, you know, leaning on folks around you, and asking for support in this work, and developing like colleagues within the work who you can turn to and be open and honest and real with, has been a real lifesaver for me. And then also like finding these moments where you can kind of lean into new aspects of the work that you're curious about, so that kind of like when you get to the place where you feel like you've treaded this path a few times before and you just can't stand to do it again, think about what part of the work you don't know about, or what part of the story you want to investigate, and just finding ways to kind of renew your interest, I think, and maybe turn in a different direction. And I feel like I've managed to stay a part of the movement work, but through shifting roles have kind of continued to grow. So if you can maneuver that, that's helpful too.
You can't pour from your cup if it's empty, and I think that's important to remember. I don't know if we want to ask one more question or if we want to call it there. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I will leave that decision to Kevin.
Thanks, Tiffany. I think since we did schedule it to end at 7, we'll stop there for now. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to you and to all of our speakers for speaking so wonderfully and telling us about the wonderful world that is nonprofit work in food justice. And I just want to say to all of our attendees that we do have one more panel coming a bit later. It's in February 2nd, and it's going to highlight some really fantastic work in agriculture. And I'll drop the link for the series, and you can register for our 3rd session there. But other than that, I wanted to say thank you so much. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Nina and Rosalie, who are working behind the scenes. If y'all want to turn your cameras on and just wave hi. And we just wanted to say thank you for doing that. And I don't know, Jesus, if you want to add anything and end it off.
Put it in the chat. Definitely check them out if you want to get involved in, you know, working at an urban farm here at Berkeley. So
great. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And hope you all have a good week. Thank you.